Hi, my name's Tiana, and I'm here with Christopher and Cassie. And today we're doing a presentation on the population of aging parents who are raising children or adolescents. This population is known as the sandwich generation. So what is the sandwich generation? This population and this term refers to anyone who cares for an aging parent while simultaneously taking care of their own children. This is more of an overarching term that doesn't necessarily refer to a specific age range, but it is a common experience for middle-aged Americans. Roughly half of Americans aged between 45 and 60 have an older parent that they're taking care of, as well as taking care of at least one child under, under the age of 18, or are providing financial support to a child who's 18 years or older. And on average, for most caregivers in this generation, they're spending about 20 hours a week, ranging from 11 to 60 on the extreme end, taking care of their parents as well as their children. So there's some specific terminology that refers to different populations within the sandwich generation. The term sandwich generation is more of an overarching term. So we have adults who care for their aging parents and young children. And then when we look at the club sandwich generation, that is multi-generational, which means it includes either grandparents or grandchildren as well. So that's more specifically for adults who are 40 or 60 who are caring for their aging parents and adult children or grandchildren, or adults who are 20 to 40 who are caring for their aging parents, young children, or their grandparents. And then the open-faced sandwich is anyone else who provides senior care. And while we were researching all of this, we thought the terms were quite funny and engaging, which is why we decided to include them as well. So we're going to look into the demographics of the sandwich generation in the US specifically. As you can see in this graph in 2021, roughly 23% of all adults belong to the sandwich generation. And of that 23% of adults, the most common ages for members of the sandwich generation range from 30 to 59 years old. And you can see here in the graph that kind of overwhelmingly, the majority of them fall specifically between the 40 and 49 years old age range. Additionally, about 1 in 5 sandwich caregivers has a minor, an adult child, and an aging parent who they're supporting financially. And roughly 7 to 10 million adults are long distance caregivers. And regarding demographics for gender and racial ethnic groups, they're between men and women and different racial and ethnic groups, they're about equally likely to be in the sandwich generation, but there has not been extensive research on how risk factors are influenced by these various socio-demographic factors.
So what are some common experiences of people in the sandwich generation? First, it's important to highlight the uniqueness of every situation where multi-generational caregiving is occurring. You might be married, a single parent, an only child taking care of a child of a parent with a disability or who has a chronic illness. And all of these factors can impact how much responsibility and expectations fall on you. And the way that each of us processes emotions is very differently too. In addition to all of these responsibilities, caregivers may be coming to terms with the idea of their parents dying and maybe even their own thoughts around aging. And another thing to highlight is that it is ever changing. There's a daily unpredictability factor that comes with caregiving in general, let alone for multiple generations. And if you are taking care of children, parents know very well they can get sick at any moment. And additionally, if you're taking care of an aging parent, especially one diagnosed with an illness, often the caregiving responsibilities tend to change as the illness progresses or with the functional decline of the care recipient. So there can be this feeling of needing to be on alert that can become increasingly stressful over time. And there also may be days, though, when it's incredibly rewarding and smooth going. Uh, Financial commitment is also a really big factor. You may have college expenses for your own children colliding with medical expenses for aging parents. Assisted living facilities average over $5,000 a month in California, all while the person who is caregiving may be planning for their own retirement. And then, needless to say, it can be extremely time consuming depending on the age of children and just dependency of either generation. Um, it can also be really impactful on other roles and relationships. So, given the impact on time and energy, the way someone shows up in the role of parent, child, spouse, friend, or even employee at work would naturally be impacted. This can look different for each family, but it's common to cause conflict among siblings and spouses. And also, the relationship between the caregiver and care recipient will naturally be affected. It also kind of depends on life stage identity. Falling into a caregiving role can elicit different experiences based on your life stage. You may be a young adult in your mid 20s who has to move back home and take care of their parents, or maybe you are rising in your career while already balancing taking care of children. But with all that said, caregiving can also be a really rewarding experience. It can bring people closer, increase quality time, and it can be beneficial for grandchildren to spend time with older generations. And most importantly, however you are showing up to the caregiving role, it demonstrates resilience.
So with that, there are various risk factors associated with this population. Research suggests that the negative health consequences of caregiving are more severe for sandwich caregivers specifically. This is not to say at all that all sandwich caregivers will experience these symptoms, but there are various risk factors associated with this population. Generally, they're at risk for potential mental health conditions. Some of these can include exhaustion, depression, burnout, isolation, guilt, and anxiety. This can manifest in many ways. Some signs and some symptoms can be feelings of failure and self-doubt, feelings of loneliness, detachment, loss of motivation, loss of interest in activities, feelings of unworthiness, defensive behaviors, difficulty forgiving yourself. Again, this is not something that will happen, but just something that caregivers are at risk for. They can also experience increased levels of stress and increased levels of marital distress. There is one specific study that was focusing on transplant surgeons in the sandwich generation, and it reported that 38.5% of transplant surgeons within this population reported marital distress. Not only can sandwich generation caregivers be at risk for the various mental health conditions that I had just spoken of, but they also can expose their children to these same conditions, which can lead to problems of depression, problem behaviors, and diminished functioning as well.
So there are many systemic and societal impacts on caregiving and the sandwich generation specifically, but we wanted to highlight just a few. So one is that we live in a fragmented healthcare system, especially in the United States. Mental health, nutrition and fitness, long-term, short-term care, childcare, they're all separate things that the family caregiver often needs to navigate. And within that, access to resources is not equitable. Socioeconomic status, of course, affects what type of outside help that someone can hire, as well as what type of healthcare they have. And there's also been historically defined gender roles. So historically, the role of primary caregiver has been assigned to women, and research shows that this can still be seen today. And now, with the vast majority of women in the workforce, balancing a job and caregiving responsibilities can be extremely overwhelming. And leaving a career for full-time caretaking can have financial consequences, limit career advancement, and even future social security. But more research also definitely needs to be done on non-heterosexual partnerships. Also, the experience can be very different based on if someone comes from a more individualistic or collectivist culture. It's been shown that the perception of caregiving as a burden can make the experience more difficult than those who have a normalized view on it. And families that have greater value on independence and self-sufficiency may experience the hardships of multi-generational caregiving in different ways than those who come from a more collectivist background. And then lastly, there's a decrease in average family size. So this just simply means there'll be less people available for caregiving. Research has found that in 1970, there were 21 potential caregivers for each person over the age of 85. And by 2030, they're expected to be only 6. And that will severely strain intergenerational resources. So, what are some coping strategies that can be done? Some have to do with how a person sees the situation and themselves in it. Exploring if you might be resisting the reality of the situation and finding ways to be open to acceptance. That idea of feelings of burden increasing the stress on family caregivers is really important, and viewing it as more normal can help this phase be less stressful. However, this can be especially hard to do when caregiving is unexpected, as it often can be with sudden illness or a loss of functionality in a person. So that resistance, sorry, is so natural, but working towards acceptance is most helpful. And one way to do that is simply avoiding avoidance. Not trying to distract or ignore the situation. Avoidance coping specifically has been associated with burnout and can lead to emotional exhaustion and reduced personal accomplishment, especially when the stressor can't be removed. Another shift is in our relationship to oneself, relinquishing perfectionism, bringing your best self to the role, and finding ways to show yourself compassion. And one idea is to look for signs of success, even when it might be really hard. Searching for these moments and the ways you've fulfilled your roles, especially if you lack direct feedback, um, and pausing to really be with and celebrate those moments can be really helpful. Another way is to identify and align your values. Why are you in this caregiving role, and how does it align with your values in your life? And then embed those in your daily life. It can also be really helpful to think of the benefits. Some things we mentioned earlier with deepening relationships, increasing quality time spent together, especially if aging parents may be nearing the end of life. And lastly, this might sound difficult, but self care is super important. And given how stretched thin people in this position can be, it is still important to find time to put yourself first. Research has shown that even 15 minutes of time doing something that you love or taking time for yourself can improve well being. And it's important to maintain your own health, nutrition, exercise, sleep. And some people have even set time aside to think or just making sure that they have time to grieve. But this quote from one of the research articles about making and protecting time to be alone is really important. And so some other coping strategies involve other people, right? So one idea is going from seeing one person as the caregiver to this idea of there being a caregiving team. If possible, of course, it's ideal to try to get the family on board to not have one person taking on the majority of the work. So, is a shift in perspective possible for the family to see these challenges and responsibilities as an opportunity for growth, healing strained relationships, and becoming closer to one another? Also, making sure that there is some clearly defined structure about decision making and having a routine can be really flexible, uh, can be really helpful, sorry. Which takes to family flexibility. Due to that ever changing nature of caregiving, it's imperative for the family to be able to be flexible. This includes willingness to change roles and use outside resources. And the idea that adaptation is an ongoing process. And to maintain that flexibility, communication is vital. And this means being prepared for the way people communicate with each other to potentially change. Also, discussing and managing expectations can be really helpful here. It's also important to establish boundaries and cultivate the ability to say no to questions and favors from family members, from other healthcare teams, if that's possible in your workplace, but doing so in a way that's also within your own limits of feeling guilt. This can be a really good form of self care. Uh, and then social support. It has been shown that social support can decrease feelings of burden and isolation. Friends, the community, extended family can all be so important when coping with stress. So, engaging in social activities, even if infrequent or just a phone call, can be really helpful in maintaining well being. And lastly, asking for help and using external support and resources, which takes us to our next portion of the presentation.
So as Cassie just mentioned, it's important for us to look outside of our own resources sometimes. So accepting help. We often have trouble accepting help. We value self-sufficiency and often don't want to accept help. We're a culture that values what we can do for ourselves and for our family. However, has been noted, there's been a change in the structure of families and support in society. Families used to be much larger, so you'd have more help taking care of both the elderly and the young. We don't have larger families anymore, so we have smaller families, and thus we sometimes have to turn to support from society. We have to honor the pressure of time, money, and attention. We are busier these days. Money does not go as far as it used to go, as it did even decades ago, and we have only limited attention to take care of all these forces and responsibilities that we have for taking care of parents and children all at the same time. So there's an internal stigma that we have to address. We sometimes think badly of ourselves if we have to participate or ask for help from benefits programs. People are good-hearted and they often want to leave resources for those they consider being in more need. And sometimes this leads to shame and embarrassment when people are in greatest need. I offer that sometimes we must set those feelings aside so that we can take care of our children and our parents as best we can, because these resources are available to all of us, which leads to external stigma. We often think that it's going to be too hard to get the paperwork processed. We worry about the phone calls involved. We think, well, it really won't help us that much. Will the time and effort be worth it? But I can only offer that in the time frames we're looking at sometimes, which can last years and years of support for both children and the elderly, we really want to take advantage of the resources that society provides, because after years and years, the total of the resources offered can really, really add up. Next slide, please. So remember, you've already paid into the system. These systems, these benefits are already in place because of taxes you've already paid into. Programs are already in place. Remember, too, that the cost of living keeps going up, but incomes do not. Dollars do not go as far as they did decades ago. If you can get support for groceries, for paying bills for food, which many of these programs offer, that means it can be easier to get enough food and to get healthier food along the way. That also makes sure that we stay healthy and that we don't get sick. Extra Help, which is a program within Medicaid, allows you to help up to almost $4,000 of subscription pills every year. And overall, if you can take this aid, it means less stress and worrying about making ends meet. Now, some of the things I'm about to discuss are focused more on the elderly generation. I bring this up because most parents will have spent several years processing and learning the ropes of how to take care of their children. They start when they're young, build it up, they get better at it with each perhaps next child. But if a parent suddenly shows up, or an in-law, or both parents show up, we're suddenly stuck with information and a lack of knowledge about how to move forward with helping them. So navigating resources. One of the biggest problems people have within the sandwich generation is finding them. There is no one website that's going to handle all these things. In fact, most of these programs are going to be based either within a town or a county or a state. There aren't a lot of federal programs for this. The federal dollars are distributed among local communities. So it can be difficult to find the resources you're looking for. But to help you with your search, I'm going to offer two websites to begin with. One is 211 and one is One Degree. 211 is a website you go to. Here's the example from LA County, 211 LA, and you just type in 211, whatever community you happen to be in, whether it's California or another state, it will plug you into whatever 211 website you should be going to within the local community you live in or the county you live in. Once you get there, you simply type in whatever you want for resources, and then a list of opportunities are going to appear on your screen. It's going to take you some time to find them. I'm not trying to make this sound easier than it's going to be. There's work involved here. But again, we're talking about resources that could help you out over years to come and alleviate a lot of the stress and financial concerns you might be having. Now, an interesting feature of 211, next slide, please, is if you click that little filters button on the left of the map, you'll see that you can type in the range you're looking at for finding things, different languages, what kind of specific needs or lifestyle you happen to be caught up in that time. So it'll help filter down to the specific needs and the best resources of the conditions you're living with at this time. Another source is 1 Degree. Type in onedegree.org, it'll take you to this website. You'll notice the arrow points to the location, and then the next, you're going to enter in the find for resources. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we then click over to the resources. And then if you don't want to go down on your own the rabbit hole that way, you can also click, next slide, please, just one of these big buttons right in the center of the screen that'll help you in broad categories. And then finally, at the bottom of the screen, you'll also find that there's tabs that will help you find specific research elements to do deep research on any kind of category that you happen to be looking for. So Extra Help, which I mentioned earlier, is a program through Medicare. A lot of the elderly will already have Medicare. And what this does is it helps people with limited income and resources to cut their Part D cost down. So that's prescription. Some people automatically already set up for it if they have full Medicaid, or if they're getting help from the state already for Part B premiums, or if they already have supplemental security income from benefits from Social Security. And if you don't already have it, you can also apply for it. And again, this may be something that your parent can handle on their own, or it is something that you can help them with, and you can begin doing the legwork to help them find these resources from the Extra Help program. Food and nutrition, very important. And again, because food is going to cost a lot of money in a household, each state is going to have its own, and each county will have its own resources for handling this kind of thing. Here's the website for the California Department of Aging, handling food and nutrition. And it can actually help you with adults with disabilities, informal caregivers, and family caregivers. So it's a broad range of resources that can help you out with this. There's two broad categories I want to address here for the elderly. The next slide, please. One is, if you just were to scroll down a little bit on that page, you would find congregate meal programs. And that means people can go out and gather with other people for meals that are provided by the community. And if you click on that tab, you'll find a list of those within your area. And the next tab is going to take you to home delivered meals, which will bring home meals, have them delivered to wherever you're living, which means that if the elderly person does not have access to getting around on their own, the meals come directly to them, which means that you may not have to be home all the time to help them out. And that, again, will help with the time and the money. So service in your area. There's a, this is from the state of California, and you will find, if you click on the link, a map of services in your county. You click on the county, and that will take you to all sorts of resources for elderly populations, from food to getting help, getting around, things like that. So again, California and other states provide many, many resources that you may not have thought of tapping into, but by having them available, it will help you once again take care of things like time, financial services, and other resources that you might need. And then another fascinating service is in-home supportive services. If you have hired in somebody to take care of someone in your household, you can find money through resource programs to help them pay for those. And these resources will pay even family members, friends, or neighbors who are taking care of people within a home as well, which means that you within certain circumstances, can be paid an hourly rate for taking care of people, which again will bring more money into your house's pocket. Last, NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it is the largest grassroots mental health organization. It's a peer-to-peer community site. It allows people to contact other people going through the exact same kind of problems that you're going through. So first of all, if you're dealing with somebody who might, let's say, for example, be having mental health issues, you will be able to talk to people who are having trouble with members of their family who are having mental health issues. Also, if you're dealing with depression or dealing with the specific problems that might be coming up, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, about being a member of the sandwich generation, you'll be able to find and talk to people who are also having those exact same problems. If you go to NAMI, you also find links to provide other resources as well for mental health concerns. Because of the stress involved with being a member of the sandwich generation, this is a really important resource for everyone to take advantage of if they can. And finally, the Caregiver Action Network. This is the leading family caregiver organization, offers peer support and other resources free of charge for family caregivers who care for loved ones with chronic conditions, disabilities, disease, frailties with old age. If you go to their website, again, you'll find tabs, links, resources that will connect you directly to with other resources that you'll be able to bring in your home to help you out. And then this is a link that you can use to find our reference list and find all the articles, references, documents, and websites that we've referred to in this presentation.